Something important just happened in Cleveland. And if you're paying attention, it tells you exactly where this franchise is headed. The Browns have officially requested a second, in-person interview with Grant Udinski. And no, this isn't just another name being tossed around for optics. This is the kind of move teams make when they're getting serious, when they're narrowing the field, when they're quietly zeroing in on a direction. Because second interviews don't happen by accident. They happen when ownership and the front office see something they like, something they believe could shape the future of the team. And in this case, that future is directly tied to Shedeur Sanders. For months now, Browns fans have been asking the same question. What kind of coach does this team actually need? A safe, conservative hire that plays not to lose, or a young offensive mind who understands how to build around a quarterback instead of boxing him in? This latest move answers that question louder than any press conference ever could. Grant Udinski represents a shift, a departure from outdated thinking, a bet on creativity, adaptability, and modern offense. The kind of offense that doesn't live off quick screens and panic throws, but actually trusts the quarterback to push the ball downfield while still protecting him in the pocket. And that matters more than ever for Shedeur. This is the first time in his pro career where the Browns appear to be prioritizing fit over familiarity, development over ego, long-term growth over short-term optics. That alone should grab your attention. What makes this even more interesting is the timing. Cleveland didn't rush this process. They let the interviews play out. They watched the reactions. And now they're bringing Udinski back into the building face to face. That tells you something changed. Either the vision became clearer, or the competition fell behind. And when you look around the league, you see a pattern forming. Teams aren't afraid to go young anymore. They're not waiting for decades of experience to prove someone understands offense. They're finding smart minds early and letting them grow alongside their quarterback. That's exactly the path Cleveland appears to be leaning toward. The question now is if this supports Shedeur Sanders. It's how far the Browns are willing to go to finally get this right. And once you break down who Grant Udinski really is, and why this second interview matters, the bigger picture becomes impossible to ignore. In the NFL, first interviews are about introductions. Second interviews are about decisions. That's the part most casual fans miss. Teams don't bring candidates back into the building unless they're seriously considering handing them the keys, especially not in person. This isn't a Zoom call. This is sit-down meetings with ownership, front office executives, and football operations staff. This is vision alignment. This is culture talk. This is scheme breakdowns. This is long-term planning. And Cleveland doesn't waste these meetings. Requesting a second interview with Grant Udinski means he's officially separated himself from the pack. It means the Browns didn't just like what they heard the first time. They saw enough to dig deeper. That matters because this franchise is coming off a stretch where coaching decisions directly impacted quarterback development. They can't afford another miss. They can't afford another hire that doesn't match the direction they claim to be heading. This second meeting is about one main thing: fit. Not just whether Udinski can call plays, but whether he fits the identity Cleveland wants to build, whether he understands what this roster needs, whether he can build an offense that actually evolves instead of staying stuck in outdated concepts. And here's the quiet part nobody saying out loud. When teams bring back a young offensive coordinator like this, they're usually thinking about the quarterback first. They're not just hearing a coach, they're hearing a blueprint, a system, a philosophy, a long-term partnership between play caller and QB. Which brings us to the biggest reason this move has Browns fans buzzing. Because Grant Udinski isn't just another coordinator. His background, his style, and his approach line up perfectly with the type of offense Shedeur Sanders needs to thrive. And once you understand that, this hire starts to make a whole lot more sense. Grant Udinski isn't a big-name celebrity coach yet. And that's exactly why he's dangerous in the best way possible. He's part of the new generation of offensive minds that teams around the league are quietly circling. The kind of coach who doesn't rely on reputation. He relies on systems, preparation, and innovation. Udinski built his reputation by being obsessed with details, film breakdowns, defensive tendencies, play sequencing, how to manipulate coverages instead of just reacting to them. He's known for staying late, grinding tape, and constantly tweaking game plans instead of running the same script every Sunday. And that mentality matters, because the NFL has changed. Static offenses don't survive anymore. The league belongs to coaches who can adjust on the fly, who can design mismatches, who can build offenses around what their quarterback does best, not force quarterbacks to fit a rigid system. That's where Udinski separates himself. He isn't married to one style. He adapts to personnel. He builds game plans around strengths. That's why his name has started popping up in coaching circles as someone to watch. And here's the part Browns fans should pay attention to. Udinski's offensive philosophy leans towards spacing, tempo, and vertical stress. Not just dumping the ball off, not living off short throws, but actually forcing defenses to respect the entire field. That style doesn't just move the chains. It opens opportunities. It creates confidence for quarterbacks. It builds rhythm, which is exactly what Cleveland has been missing. But the real impact of this potential hire isn't about schemes on a whiteboard. It's about one player. Because when you connect Udinski's approach to Shedeur Sanders' skill set, the fit becomes obvious. And that's where this story really gets interesting. For Shedeur Sanders, this move isn't just good news. It's a lifeline. Up until now, he's been working inside systems that didn't fully unlock what he does best. Conservative play calling, limited vertical shots, predictable concepts, situations where he had to make something out of nothing far too often. That wears on any young quarterback. But Grant Udinski's style flips that script. His approach is built around letting quarterbacks actually play quarterback, creating space, stretching defenses horizontally and vertically, designing progressions that make reads cleaner instead of more complicated, giving passers rhythm throws early so they can settle in instead of constantly playing catch-up. That's exactly what Shedeur needs. Because Shedeur isn't just a checked-on QB. He's comfortable pushing the ball downfield. He's poised in the pocket when protection holds. He thrives when receivers have room to operate and routes are layered properly. And this offseason is huge. For the first time, Shedeur is finally getting a full offseason to prepare. Full training camp reps, full installation of the offense, real time to build chemistry with receivers and linemen. That alone changes everything. Pair that with a young offensive mind who actually wants to build around him instead of limiting him, and you've got the foundation for real growth. That's why this second interview matters so much. It's not just about Cleveland hearing a coach. It's about Cleveland choosing who gets to shape Shedeur's development during the most important stage of his career. But fans didn't just focus on the football side of this news. Social media exploded almost immediately. Some excited, some skeptical, some straight up wild with the reactions. And that reaction tells you a lot about how desperate this fan base is for real change. The moment the news dropped, Browns Twitter went into chaos. Some fans celebrated like the rebuild had officially started. Others immediately pulled up Udinski's resume. And of course, the memes showed up right on time. One of the funniest reactions, people saying Udinski looks like Johnny Manziel in disguise. That comparison spread fast, jokes everywhere. side-by-side photos, "Please not again" comments flooding timelines. But underneath, the humor was something real. Hoping. For the first time in a while, Browns fans weren't arguing about tanking. They weren't begging for another veteran stopgap. They weren't screaming about recycling the same old coaching names. They were talking about progress, about finally hearing young, creative minds like other successful franchises have done, about building something new instead of patching old systems together. You saw comments like, "Don't let him leave the building." Others saying, "This is the modern NFL move." And plenty of fans pointing out how teams like the Rams, Dolphins, and Texans transformed their offenses by trusting younger coaches with fresh ideas. That shift in tone matters. Because Cleveland fans have been burned before, they don't get excited easily anymore. When optimism shows up organically, it usually means people feel something different in the air. And that energy isn't accidental. It reflects what ownership has been signaling behind the scenes. Jimmy Haslam hasn't been loud about it, but his actions have been speaking clearly. Because this second interview fits into a bigger pattern Cleveland has been building toward. And once you zoom out and look at the bigger picture, you realize this isn't just about one coaching candidate. It's about a franchise reset. Jimmy Haslam hasn't been holding flashy press conferences. He hasn't been making bold public promises. But behind the scenes, his recent moves paint a clear picture. Cleveland isn't trying to patch problems anymore. They're resetting the foundation. The Stefanski era showed what happens when systems don't evolve fast enough, when offensive philosophy stays rigid, when development gets delayed. Ownership saw the consequences, and now they're adjusting the approach. Instead of chasing safe names with predictable resumes, the Browns are leaning into adaptability. Younger minds, coaches who grew up studying modern offenses instead of outdated playbooks. The Udinski interview fits perfectly into that strategy. It signals that Cleveland wants creativity, flexibility, coaches who can grow alongside the roster instead of trying to force the roster to adapt to them. And most importantly, it signals a commitment to Shedeur Sanders. You don't bring in young offensive minds unless you plan on developing your quarterback properly. You don't prioritize scheme fit unless you believe in the player you're building around. Haslam's actions suggest Cleveland is finally ready to stop wasting time. Stop recycling old systems. Stop delaying growth. And start building with intention. But hearing the right coach is only one piece of the puzzle. Because even the best play caller can't succeed without the right pieces around the quarterback. Which brings us to the Browns' offseason blueprint. Because what Cleveland does next could determine whether Shedeur actually breaks out or stays stuck fighting uphill. If Cleveland truly wants Shedeur Sanders to take the next step, hearing the right coach is only the beginning. The real work happens in the offseason. And everything the Browns do from here on out needs to point in one direction: protection, support, and stability. First priority, the offensive line. You can't develop a young quarterback if he's constantly running for his life. Cleveland knows this. Expect them to aggressively target linemen through the draft and free agency. Not just depth pieces, but real starters who can anchor the pocket and give Shedeur time to operate. Because when Shedeur has time, his decision-making improves. His mechanics stay clean. His confidence grows. That's not opinion, that's football reality. Next comes weapons. Receivers who can separate. Tight ends who can create mismatches. Running backs who force defenses to respect play action. Udinski's offensive style thrives when skilled players can stress defenses at multiple levels. Spacing matters. Speed matters. Route runners matter. And Cleveland finally has the cap flexibility and draft capital to address those needs. Then there's chemistry. This offseason will be the first time Shedeur gets uninterrupted reps with the same core group. Full install of the offense, full offseason program, full training camp without chaos surrounding coaching changes midstream. That consistency is massive. It's the difference between surviving games and controlling them. And when you combine upgraded protection, better weapons, and a coach who actually designs around quarterback strengths, the ceiling changes completely. But all of this still hinges on one final decision. Because none of it matters if Cleveland hesitates at the top. The head coaching hire will determine whether this blueprint actually becomes reality or stays stuck on paper. And that brings us to the biggest question of all. What happens if Grant Udinski actually gets the job? Because that outcome would signal a full commitment to the new era. If Grant Udinski actually lands this job, it won't just be another coaching hire. It will be a statement. It tells the entire league that Cleveland is done playing it safe, done recycling familiar names, done building around outdated systems. This would be the Browns officially committing to a modern, offense-first identity. The first change you notice, tempo. Udinski's approach emphasizes pace, spacing, and forcing defenses to stay uncomfortable. That means fewer stagnant drives, fewer predictable play calls, more motion, more creativity, more stress on opposing coordinators instead of putting all the pressure on the quarterback. For Shedeur Sanders, that's huge. Instead of being asked to carry broken possessions on his back, he'd be stepping into a system designed to create easy completions early, open deep shots later, and keep defenses guessing. That's how young quarterbacks grow confidence. That's how rhythm is built. Then there's the locker room impact. Young coaches bring energy. They connect differently with players. Communication improves. Buy-in increases. When players feel like the system actually fits their strengths, effort naturally rises. And Cleveland desperately needs that culture shift. Another major change would be adaptability. Udinski isn't tied to one rigid playbook. That means the offense can evolve week to week instead of getting exposed once teams figure it out. Adjustments mid-season, adjustments mid-game. That flexibility is what separates average teams from contenders. But here's the biggest signal of all. Hearing Udinski would confirm that Cleveland is fully committing to Shedeur Sanders as the future. You don't pair a young quarterback with a young, offensive-minded coach unless you plan to let them grow together. That's how long-term stability is built. That's how franchises stop hitting the reset button every 2 years. And if Cleveland finally gets this right, this isn't just a rebuild anymore. It becomes the start of something sustainable. Which brings us to the final question Browns fans are waiting to answer. Is this the move that finally changes everything? When you step back and look at the full picture, this move isn't random. It's intentional. Cleveland didn't bring Grant Udinski back for a second interview just to check a box. They did it because they're finally choosing direction over comfort, vision over tradition, development over delay. And for the first time in a long time, that direction points straight toward building around Shedeur Sanders the right way. This offseason is a turning point. The coaching hire, the offensive line upgrades, the new weapons, the full training camp reps, all of it is lining up. And if the Browns actually follow through, Shedeur won't be walking into chaos anymore. He'll be walking into structure, support, stability. That's how quarterbacks break out. Not through miracles, through preparation and smart leadership. Now the ball is in Cleveland's court. Do they stay bold? Do they commit to the modern NFL approach? Do they finally stop wasting development years? Because the choice they make next will define the next 5 seasons of this franchise. So I want to hear from you. Is Grant Udinski the right hire for the Browns? Should Cleveland go all in on a young, offensive-minded coach? And do you believe Shedeur Sanders is ready to take that next leap with the right system? Drop your honest take in the comments. If you want real Browns updates without the media spin, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We're tracking every move, every interview, and every offseason shift. Because Cleveland isn't just changing coaches. They're rewriting their future.